Welcome to this Socratic interview where I, Mark Blaise, will interview Humberto Schwab, the inventor of the Socratic design. Very important for maybe a new European narrative. Humberto, it's very interesting, your history, your personal history, because you were born in Indonesia from Dutch parents. Do you feel still, after all these years, a double identity of being, semi-Indonesian and semi-European?
Well, not really, in the way that we were not in the Indonesian culture, because it was a Dutch culture which was erected there in Indonesia. And this Dutch culture, which is the Indische culture, we call it, is still present in my family. So my family is quite different than most Dutch families. I saw that all my life. So that gave me always a sort of awareness of what the Dutch society is.
Actually, it's a metaphor for Europe, because Europeans say we are European, but we are not as European or in the same way European as our neighbors.
Yeah.
Even the Belgian and the Germans are different kind of Europeans than the Dutch. How do you think philosophically we could change this almost DNA of nationalism and pride, which really, stops us of mingling?
Yes, that's a very important one, of course. The idea, philosophically speaking, the idea of Europe is strongly connected, of course, with the Greek philosophers, the Renaissance, and the Enlightenment. But those three elements are quite different from each other. And after the Enlightenment, we got, of course, the industrialization, which was also a lot of influence with the later American consumer society. If you look at the whole diverse history of Europe, it was always fighting about not only goods and terrains, but also about ideas. So what is very strong in Europe is that philosophy is basically incorporated in this part of the world, because people are fighting about ideas. And having done that, so many different fights, although Plato already wrote a lot of big narrative which we should have done, but we did not do it because other people said, well, Plato is not correct. We should do it different way. But this fight between ideas, or you can call it in a better way, a dialogue of 1,000 years, is basically going to be the procedure of you can say, the concept of Europe. That we can fight about ideas and that we can listen to the other. First we killed one another, but now we don't kill each other. If you say I'm a liberal and I say I'm a communist, we can go on talking, or we just we stop the friendship, but we don't kill each other for that. And this is a very interesting point of rooted already in the philosophy of Plato, that we can talk, that Socrates says, okay, tell everything what you think about love. And there are very different opinions comes about love, and everybody can reflect on it, and everybody can even build his life on that idea. So in Greek, we had people who were living in tons without nothing. Somebody said, I need nothing, and another said, I need gold, and the other said, I need books. And one said, I go to the garden of the light, and then if you enter the garden of the light, some would think they're all naked people, and he was just reading a book. So it's all these different thoughts about what is a good life is typically Europe. Because in the rest of the world, people have also thoughts, of course, but they did not came to that confrontations of different ideas. This was basically the catalysator of Europe.
So we should be grateful to the Greek philosophers, to the Renaissance, and to the Enlightenment, actually for teaching us that listening is such an important ingredient to come together and not to fight intellectually, but not to fight with weapons. Do you believe there is enough left of this talent in the European Union today? Are we listening to each other? Are we really listening?
This heritage is under fire because for instance, in France or in Spain, we stop part of philosophy teaching. They don't have an important impact anymore. We are dominated strongly by the philosophy of consumerism, which has such a great impact that you can see that the bodies of human beings have already changed. So we use more our dopamine system than our serotonin system. And the dopamine system is the lowest level of satisfaction, but also the most addictive one, and also the economically most profitable one. If you get your people on dopamine addiction, you have an economy, you have a circulation of goods, you can control them because they want it every day, which is the essence of dopamine addiction. So wonderful organized. And if we see this in the American culture, more enlarged, this consumerism, we have to realize that we have the same imported. And we have stopped basically our culture of development, and I stress always more the Renaissance than the Enlightenment because there are quite different roots. But in the Renaissance we see this aesthetic enjoyment, this essence of awareness of being, Pico della Mirandola, who talks about the beauty of living, and it is a living without anything you need to consume. So it's a living about understanding what it means to be, a very important subject of European philosophy. What does it mean to be a human being?
So what you're saying is that we became more materialistic and consumers than philosophers, and that actually this whole attitude and development is a big threat to our talent in philosophy, in discussion, in dialogue, in listening. At the same time, what would you propose to the young generations who want stuff, who want fast food, who want travel, who want satisfaction now? And they have no time to read, they have no time for discussion. And if this is the basis of a stable and powerful Europe for the future, we have a problem.
We have a big problem, but we also have a big challenge here. We are dominated by the Silicon Valley philosophy, which is addiction to social media, addiction to artificial intelligence, or even more comfort. So the ideal of, you could say, of some consumer philosophy is sitting on your chair and the drone will bring the chicken into your mouth. Well, also in Europe, we have secrets of good life, which tells you that this is exactly not what you should do. So now we have a crisis because people realize they're going to be out of jobs. Well, that's the worst what can happen to a dopamine consumer addicted society. Because without job, what should I do? And here we come back to the you can say the wisdom, the old wisdom of the Renaissance. It is not about producing, consuming. It is about having an active life. And an active life can be sitting and thinking, or painting, or whatever. But it is not about this consumer orientations. But the youth, that's your question, more and more young people are not prepared to go in this stream. So, for instance, one of the key values imported by John Locke, that is property, is losing a lot of value in the hearts and minds of young people. They don't want to own things. We can share everything. They can even now, there is a sort of app where you can share your clothes. So that's, you see signs of tokens of revolutions in the basic ingredients. How can we define a good life? And we from Socratic Design want to, and we work a lot with young people, and what we see is that people are addicted to old philosophical assumptions. So if we go on just debating and talking about policy in a superficial way, we will never discover that we are operating from wrong assumptions. So in order to move forward, we have to be, in our new narrative, looking, evaluating what are the assumptions we are doing. So for instance, people have the assumption they want property, they have the assumption that the other is an enemy, that all people are egoists, that we are a brain, and that your ego is in your brain. It's the essence of our system, and they are all fatally wrong.
So what you're saying is that the young Europeans are the victim of wrong interpretation of what is a good life. For them, a good life is property, a job, income, holidays, beauty for themselves, and they forgot about what is the beauty of the soul. So how will you convince these generations to exchange their comfort zone for a more spiritual approach of life?
Well, I didn't mention spiritual, but I would mostly agree to reuse the word soul, because it's a philosophical issue that we forgot the quality of the soul, because we said it's a scientific inclination. What you cannot see does not exist. So only the reality is what you can measure. And this had such a strong impact in our past 100 years that even in hospitals, in elderly houses, in families, everybody says, I cannot measure that. It's nothing. Somebody is burning depressive down inside. I cannot measure it, so there's nothing going on. And this is the most difficult danger when we talk about artificial intelligence, because they will say, you see, we can measure it, so we can copy artificial intelligence. Well, if we can get them back into the soul without the necessity to go into religion again, we can design soul practices on an aesthetical, philosophical, morally way. It has all to do with old tribal wisdom. In old tribal wisdom, all over the world, we see that people exercise intelligence always in connection, together. So we have to leave behind, which is quite a Copernican shift, we have to leave behind the thinking alone brain towards the sitting together, creating collective attention, and then make steps. And this is a very concrete thing. We practice with young people in all sorts of academies in Barcelona, Berlin, Amsterdam, whatever, even in Istanbul. And you see it works immediately. Why? Because you tap into a strong human inclination of connection. So instead of the lessons everybody learned, you are on your, in the French culture above all, you know that, of course. You are on your own, you think yourself, you have to defend yourself, everybody is your enemy, you have to strive upwards. Instead of that narrative, we can create the collective narrative when we can make even further steps in intelligence, aesthetics and creativity, using technology, but in a complete new, different context.
It's a long story, but if I can give you a concise resume, in fact, you are against the holiness of measurement and the individual person fighting on his own for his own happiness, and you believe in the majlis, as the Arabs call them, the gatherings where people discuss things, listen to each other, add their talents instead of fighting each other, and this could be a way out of the negative spiral that Europe is in right now. Now, is there in your mind a roadmap? Is there a roadmap for the next, let's say, 1 or 2 years? And which steps do you have in mind to create a completely new narrative for Europe?
I think it's necessary because the left or the right, both have inclinations to defend Europe, but they always do it on the wrong, with the wrong reasons. This is economy or defending against immigrants, or all that sort of defensive, low-level argumentations. And I would strive for, like you also said in the former interview, for the ideal. And the ideal, people are narrative creatures. That's why we look at films and we read books. We are narrative creatures. So what we have to do within 2 years is making a new narrative together. And the narrative is where we project our good life, our good humans, our values and our striving. And this is basically making future scenarios. What we do with business, we even did it with Paris in 2 days. The mayor of Paris wanted a new story about Paris Digital. We made that in 2 days. You can make narratives with people because we are narrative creators. But you have to do it in a philosophical way, attacking the old inclinations, attacking the old, habits of thinking in wrong terms, wrong assumptions, getting rid of Thomas Hobbes, in a way, the philosopher, and going a step further, using the intelligence of Girard, Foucault, and Dewey. They all make, they all give us parts of the new narrative. We have to understand that. But the thing is that people think philosophy is there, abstract, somewhere in the tower of the highest levels of science, and it should be here on the table between the youngsters. Dialogue means sitting together, dialogoi, sitting together, and then something will happen. That we have to organize. So what Macron is doing, organizing tables, very good, but make tables around the real issues, not about wages or, security, that sort of stuff. People will never be satisfied because the essence of the dopamine is that you will be never enough.
If it's not, if the essence is not jobs and the price of gas oil, what is the essence?
That's a good question. That's the key question. We know, with philosophy, knew it before, Spinoza knew it, Plato knew it, Socrates knew it. Now the neuroscientists give them 100% the price. We know that a human flourishing depends on activity of your highest level. If you have, it's a very simple story, basically. We can sell that, it's very easy to understand. Your dopamine transporters, if you use them, so eating stuff, looking at sex, Facebook and that sort of stuff, if you have a lot of dopamine transporters, you will not have transporters for serotonin. And your dopamine is in your reptile brain, so it's very strong emotions, like drugs. But if you practice yourself in downgrading the dopamine, you get the possibility of entering in the neocortex, in the highest level of your soul. And this has to do what we always did in Renaissance, concentrating in music, or sports, or science, or whatever. The highest level of society these people know that it's very satisfying to do physics every day. After 3 hours of physics, and you're happy. They know it, and they got a big salary, but they don't do it for the salary. They know that highest level activity is what makes you happy. And the scientists have told us now it's the serotonin which gives you not a feeling of satisfaction, which is the dopamine, but it gives you a feeling of contentment, which is human happiness.
Now it's going to be difficult to re-educate the generations who have been used and actually hooked to dopamine. In a few words, how would you educate a 12 or 14-year-old young European? How should she or he behave to get to the point you just mentioned?
Yeah, we basically, you have to give them the whole problem in 100% real time. So not giving didactical small pieces of the cake. The whole educational system is trying to translate very complex things so that they can shallow it, which is wrong. Give them the whole problem. That's one thing. And that's our experience, because I introduced philosophy in high school in the Netherlands, and in Spain I see that also. If you give them the whole real issue, they become very active. When you practice dialogue instead of teaching, they will see, and we have done it with kids from 6 years also, they become so clever that parents were crying. How can my kids of 6 have this philosophical talk together about what is fear, for instance? They do it. You don't need a curriculum. You don't need to give this, you have to learn this and this. You let them, under good coaching, develop and thinking, and this is the European culture. Just dialoguing. And this is very simple, but it's too simple, so people will always, again, against it, because then, okay, what will I do with my books and my friends and my mathematics and so on? You can trust these kids that they will do it, but you have to give them back the original state of a human being, which is the learning adventure. But you can only learn if you get the real stuff and not the digested stuff of the teacher.
Will Europe have enough time to learn?
You know, this is a matter of one day you can transform a group. So it's easy, but you have to do it. So we have a very interesting offer of the World Economic Forum to explain some of our techniques. So that would be an interesting platform. But also we will do this sort of stuff with people like you. So people like you and me have to be active in order to create this very, you can say, fertile, very active, dynamic European dialogue with no political issues, but with the deeper philosophical issue. What does it mean in the short time that you live? What is meaningful living? And should we import all the Chinese products very cheap, or will that make us our meaningful life in jeopardy? So,
and all this without God.
And we don't need God, so that's the nice thing. You can use it God, but you can call it God in the Spinoza way or in the Muslim way. But in general, we can say good values we can agree on by just reflecting on our experience as a human being. In dialogue and in practices, or in literature, or in art. Art is one of the most strongest, you can say, source of creative ideas about good life. And so that an art is, everybody can become artist. It's not, it's one of the strongest beliefs in humanity. So here we have a very interesting challenge.
Thank you.